Of all the sins this game commits, the worst one is being boring. There is exactly one moment in Duke Nukem Forever that is fun. I know the exact moment that it became fun, and the reason it is so clear in my mind is because it is exactly that. One moment of fun. Forever is a really bad game in all sorts of ways, but you already know that. This is one of the most maligned games of all time. However, June 10th, 2021 is the 10-year anniversary of the release of Duke Nukem Forever. So I wanted to take a look at the game and see, well, I guess just see. Sort of like a crash on the highway or a video titled Wait Until the End. I wanted to see if the game is really that bad. Maybe it was just bad timing, or maybe it was buggy and it's fine now. Maybe those SJW gaming journalists came down on the game for being too manly and cool. I also wanted to look at the story of Duke Nukem Forever, the incredible background story of one of the most infamous games ever made. A lot of that story wasn't known when the game came out, but the entire industry is different now, so what really caused this? What's to blame? And it's a 10-year anniversary. Maybe someone will care about Duke Nukem suddenly, and I can get a few free clicks. It's a perfect storm because, frankly, I've tried to play Forever before. I've tried at least 3 times, and I've always failed to complete it. I've failed, frankly, to get very far before being really bored or annoyed or just shutting down the game and never finding the motivation to turn it back on. Having a video that needs to be made by a deadline? Well, hey, that's a good enough reason to actually play through the whole game. Duke Nukem Forever is the 4th game in the series, a series that was started in 1991 with a 2D side-scroller. Its 2D side-scrolling sequel, imaginatively named Duke Nukem 2, and in 1996, Duke Nukem 3D, the 3rd game that was, as you might imagine, in 3D. And while the first 2 games were very successful, this is the Duke Nukem most people know and talk about. It's the game that launched the brand to stratospheric heights and became one of the great pillars of FPS history. Over a dozen expansions were released for 3D. It was ported to almost a dozen platforms. It saw 4 full spin-offs and at least 7 mobile games. It was popular enough that people were buying the soundtrack. There's been several talks about movies. There was a popular comic series, and of course, lots and lots and lots of merchandise. Duke Nukem was a pop culture sensation, and Duke was a rude, crude dude who had no problems admitting he liked women and killing aliens. In fact, 3D is also famous because there's a couple censored versions out there where you simply can't see what the rating boards classified as pornography. It was banned in Brazil, it was censored in Germany, it was nearly pulled off the shelves in Australia. So it shouldn't be surprising to also know that it sold millions of copies, because of course it did. With a reputation like that, every gamer had to have it. And once they got it, they realized that it was a very solid shooter with some attitude. And yeah, there were pixelated nearly nudes in the game, but it wasn't that bad. This is a game that was rated M, and it really came down to, well, yeah, it deserved the M rating, and kids shouldn't have been playing it. But ultimately, it wasn't that bad. Duke wasn't only popular in pop culture, he was a connoisseur of it. Almost every level of 3D had some pop culture reference, a Terminator lying smashed, the corpse of Luke Skywalker, and some snide but friendly jabs at the Green Space Marine from Doom. The cops are pigs, The aliens hold their captives in cocoons. There's an amusement park called Babeland. It's irreverent and corny. It's ridiculous and doesn't take itself very seriously, especially compared to other games out at the time. Doom, with its intense gameplay, System Shock, with its horror and story, Heretic, with its dark and bloody alternate style, and Quake, with its hardcore cutting-edge 3D models. Duke was somewhat unique. It was fun and light and memorable. So a year or so later, the original developers decided to make a sequel, Duke Nukem Forever. And that's the last anyone would hear about it for about 10 years. A lot of games were started and stopped in that time period, some of them bearing the name Forever, some of them being other projects that just never got off the ground, some of them being sold to another developer like Alien Rampage. And there was a hunting game where Duke would hunt dinosaurs that was eventually turned into Vivisector Beasts Within. Anything to keep the lights on while Forever was slowly worked on. One of the games they started to work on in order to bring in some money was reportedly a prequel called Duke Begins that would have been worked on by a company called Gearbox. Gearbox eventually became really involved in this whole Duke Nukem thing, but it's a very long story. I made a separate video about Gearbox, their scandals and history, and there's a very big section about Duke Nukem in that video. I'll link it at the end of this one and in the description, but it's too much and too irrelevant to go over in detail. Suffice it to say that eventually Gearbox became the owner of the Duke Nukem franchise. They owned the names, they owned the contracts, they owned Duke Nukem Forever. Immediately, they began marketing the game, turning the story into hype. And then, on June 10th, 2011, the game releases. It is critically panned. It sells poorly, but not horrifically so, and then it is forgotten. Gearbox gets bought by Embracer, the multi-billion-dollar game company you've never heard of, and as far as we know today, Duke will never see a Duke 5. So, how does it stand up today? The whole reason I wanted to look at this game in the first place is because it seems like it didn't get much of a chance when it came out. There was a 15-year hype cycle behind the game, and frankly, nothing can possibly meet those kinds of expectations. This was the big one. And if it wasn't perfect, there's not much chance it would do well. It's like Half-Life 3. They can't release that game because it will never meet expectations. The question then is, did they release a good game? Did they release a fun game, or at least a funny game? Is it broken, or is it bad, or what? I'll address the humor in a minute, but technically, the game works. I experienced no problems with loading or delays or anything like that. The controls are slow and clunky, and frankly, the movement feels like an old game. It's a 90s shooter with a nicer coat of paint, so lots of circle strafing and jumping puzzles and things like that. It's very, very dated today. If you play this game today, you will feel the age hanging off of Duke's bones. It's not a pleasant feel, but if you want to experience gaming in the 90s on a modern engine, this is basically that. They made some very bad decisions right off the bat to do things like limiting you to only 2 weapons, something that fits in with Halo, certainly, but doesn't really fit the kind of gameplay you've got with Duke Nukem. Imagine playing Doom 2016, but you have to keep throwing down empty guns to pick up your enemies. It's not a fun addition. It's just more work that serves to seemingly just stop you from having too much ammo at any one point. Unfortunately, they keep the kind of inherent bullet sponginess that Duke 3D enemies had, and so they added infinite ammo boxes all over the place. Having these ammo boxes spread everywhere in a fight, yet you're only limited to 2 weapons in order to keep you from having too much ammo, well, it just doesn't work. Since you only have 2 guns. There's no need for a weapon wheel or anything like that. You have a switch guns button and then your equipment. This includes grenades and trip mines like in 3D, but also includes some new equipment, namely a hollow Duke that makes you temporarily invisible and draws fire away from you, which is very useful, and Duke vision that allows you to see in the dark. And this sucks. It sucks so very badly because they use it so very, very much. If I were to sum up my opinion of this game, it would be they use really bad mechanics really frequently. There's a car, which is a boat on land that you can drive around. This shows up all the time, and it's never fun. There's a shrinking mechanic, and it shows up all the time. And after the initial moment of, oh, hey, that's neat, I'm small, they just keep doing it over and over and over again. Fun fact, none of the textures are resized when you shrink, so they just look terrible. They combine those to have you shrink and drive an RC car, which is the best of both worlds. Oh, and all of those vehicles have a mid-mission moment where they run out of gas, and then you have to go get the gas. Then you move on to the next segment. There's puzzle sequences that you have to collect some item in the room you're in and put it in a glowing box. And, of course, the ever-present darkness sections. It's all really repetitive and, worse still, boring. The gameplay is boring. You're either in a scripted set piece locked into dialogue, or you're running through tunnels trying to get to the end of the level, or it's a boss fight. It's so linear and locked in that even though the locales change and visually it's very different throughout the game, every single part of the game plays identically. There's like 3 enemies that aren't bosses, 4 in the DLC, and then you fight 6 or 7 bosses, one almost at the end of every segment, and that's it. That's the game. It's very short. The story makes no sense. I can't even include a story segment of this script because it would consist of aliens come back to Earth and start fighting with Duke Nukem. They steal his girlfriends, so he goes to fight them. Eventually, he finds his way to their portal, which he disables by destroying the entire Hoover Dam. Then he fights the alien emperor and gets nuked by the president, who was a traitor but is dead now. Also, Duke is the president now. If that gives you whiplash, yeah, it's kind of like that. It's written in such a way that you assume it's fan fiction with a self-insert from a very sad, very lonely Tumblr writer. Duke Nukem is mostly just a Mary Sue, and a really transparent one, who moves forward exclusively because other people stroke his ego. And yeah, in this game, you don't have health, you have ego. So you literally stroke his ego throughout the game. It's terrible. These writers are almost certainly ashamed of every word they wrote in this game because none of them ever wrote anything ever again. And frankly, the world is better for it. However, we do have this testament to their prowess, which includes some humor. And I'm going to talk about it briefly, but before I do, I have 2 caveats. 1, some of these jokes are particularly nasty. Let me just try to sum up what that means by saying that I, someone who has never included something like this before, am seriously considering whether or not a content warning is necessary. The humor in this game made me uncomfortable. And if you've ever seen me on a live stream, you'd know that I'm not made uncomfortable by just about any humor. So take that as your bar. 2, it is not my job, nor my intention, to determine what is or isn't funny. I'm sure that for someone, this is the world's funniest game. But I was not that person. The humor in this game consists primarily of three things. Toilet humor, but of the lowest brow. The kind of humor where just mentioning that toilets exist is funny. If you are currently laughing, you're the perfect demographic. Secondly, jokes about sex. Again, very basic, something along the lines of, I would have sex with you because you're Duke Nukem, or boobs exist. Not exactly working hard here, which frankly is a better joke than anything in this game. And then finally, and I don't really know how to label it, but I'm just going to go with misogynistic rape and forced abortion or impregnation jokes, of which there are way too many. I want you to think for a moment about how much the world has changed in a decade, and then realize that these jokes were considered already outdated and in poor taste in 2011. I promise you, they don't get any fresher. There is more than one joke about how Duke is going to force an alien to have an abortion. There's more than one joke about how the aliens are raping and impregnating Earth's women, to which, of course, Duke's reply is, why do they always take the hot ones? And I'm going to play a segment of this game here, a small segment that takes place about halfway through, where I stopped playing for several days because, frankly, I found it disgusting. I'll just leave it here for you to enjoy in its unadulterated version.
Duke, what's happening to us?
Looks like you're fucked.
Duke, it was our first time working with an alien. Duke, we'll get the weight off in like a week, we swear.
You little bastards. That queen mother of yours is gonna pay. Oh!
At the beginning, I did say there was one moment of fun, and there was. I was playing the game, forcing myself to get through it. I wanted to stop so many times. I did stop many times. If not for making a video for this 10th anniversary, if not for the fact that I've convinced myself that maybe this is a video that I could do in a way that no one else will, well, I don't think I would have finished it. It's so bland and boring, and yet equally repulsive. I don't think Forever is funny, so its humor is merely grating. I don't like Duke's personality, so he just feels like an annoying parody that's going on way too long. The combat isn't fun, the levels aren't well designed, the controls suck, and the story is horribly written. That made it even more of a surprise to me when, during this segment, it was at this moment that I suddenly realized I was having fun. It didn't last long before I was back into the sloppy and ancient relic that is the rest of Forever, but for just a moment, just a brief moment, there was something neat. I was a small Duke fighting pig cops across the kitchen as ketchup and mustard exploded, all in order to turn off the electricity and save a waitress stuck on a box surrounded by electrified water. It was ridiculous and fun and felt both retro and yet still new. Then it was over, and it never recovered. This game starts with the president telling you how you're a relic of the past, unneeded and unwanted. And it ends with Duke saying, "What a crappy ending." And sadly, I think both of them are right. Thank you for sharing this video, and as always, I'll see you on the next one.
What kind of shit ending is that? I ain't dead. I'm coming back for more.